Good morning and welcome to our webinar today, which is being recorded. I'm Vicky Glynn, Head of Product at Bright Solid, and today I'm going to talk about the future of the workplace and how hybrid cloud technologies and thinking can power that workplace. I think it's fairly well accepted that we're in a world today that is fueled by technology, and even before COVID, digital access to technology was a key driver of innovation and possibility. In many of our industries, new technologies and new ways of working have allowed us to create and do things that previously would have seemed like science fiction. So in this webinar, I want to talk about the hybrid digital workplace and what are the myriad of needs of employees and employers, consumers and commercial organizations, and citizens and public sector organizations that form this new workplace. I'm going to talk about 4 key trends that exemplify the digital workplace, look forward to some of the innovations that are predicted to be part of our normal world in the future, to give a sense of where those trends and the hybrid cloud technology that supports them can take us. And then I want to have a pragmatic discussion about very practical ways we're working with our customers today, hoping that gives some ideas of ways you can adapt the trends and technologies for your own workplaces. So what is the hybrid digital workplace? Well, the workplace, as always, is made up of people, just like us. People who are employees and managers, who work on behalf of customer organizations, servicing customers, but also are those consumers and customers buying from other organizations as both individuals and businesses. We may be the people who deliver services to citizens, as well as being those citizens receiving them. We're all of those things all of the time. And the way we consume technology in today's always on, always connected world has brought all of those things even closer together. So the digital workplace is by necessity fueled by needs across the whole landscape. The workplace is the intersection between where we spend a huge proportion of our time, how we appeal to our customers and citizens, and how we use technology to do all of this. The competing demands for the workplace are vast. So what are some of these demands? Well, the pandemic has certainly put employee needs high on the agenda. And as employees, we've seen significant reliance on digital collaboration, a need for significant flexibility from our workplaces as we've navigated lockdowns and working from home. Employees and employers are having to consider well-being and what it means to engage in working life, sometimes exclusively through digital tools. We're thinking about the long-term impacts of how we work today and what it means to have a successful working experience. In turn, employers have seen the whole concept of physical workplaces change, fundamental differences in what a workplace is actually for. We now have the potential of a workforce who can be recruited and managed completely remotely. The whole cost basis and the assumptions that underpin them have changed as our traditional ways of working have adapted. And for our businesses that deliver products and services, demand patterns have changed overnight. There's a heightened need to resonate with a consumer that's consuming differently through multiple channels, but also wants a personalized experience. Massive society changes are disrupting some of our core buying patterns. And on top of that is the simple logistic and practical challenges of working on restrictions on movement, travel, and access. Supply chains are impacted at every level. And the reliance on predictability in the future is much harder to have. And at the same time, the threat landscape has increased as our reliance on digital access has increased, and the potential impact of digital threat has never been higher. As consumers, we've reevaluated what's important. We have strong desires to shop more locally and feel that sense of connection with who we buy from. But we still want that convenience of digital consumption. We're concerned about our data and how it's used and who has access to it. But we want to feel like organizations are treating us like individuals. We're evaluating the environmental or ethical behavior of the organizations we buy from and the bodies and individuals who represent us. And as citizens, we're demanding access to information, not only to allow us to become those armchair experts that we want to be, but to actually work out who we can meet and what we can do day to day in safety. And as public sector organizations, we have to respond to citizens across multiple channels, delivering services in ways and at volumes and under pressures we've never seen before, in an incredibly challenging time for the global and national economy. So, if you're feeling exhausted in your workplace in 2020, well, no wonder. Look at the crazy, demanding world that we face. So let's take a breath, appreciate how we've come through, and let's look at the workplace and the 4 key trends that really represent it. So it seems to me that the things that exemplify today's digital workplace is consumption, connection, thrift, and digital security. So digital consumption for me encompasses that need to collect, process, and make available information, products, and services to users, citizens, and consumers, all of whom expect to self-serve, have constant access, use multiple channels and devices, and experience good performance when doing so. Hybrid cloud technologies helps us to deliver against this need, whether that's the public cloud, which provides the capacity to consume and process data at scale globally, but also allows us to benefit from the large investment, research, and development capabilities of tech giants such as AWS, Microsoft, and Google in the form of products and services that all organizations can use. Whether it's the private cloud or on-premises solutions, which allow specific security measures or the ability to define explicit data locations and customize performance for our services, or whether it's those edge devices and the connectivity and communications that allow that connection of people and things to solutions. And we know technology has a positive effect. If we take, for example, the ability the world has had to respond to COVID-19. In an article in The Lancet in June, they talked about the timelines for vaccinations, quoting 10 to 12 years as being the average lifespan of creating a vaccine, and they were hoping for 18 months for COVID. And yet we've been able to accelerate that even further. And technology is at the heart of lots of the development work that's been done around that. For context, the first vaccine against Ebola was only approved last year, 43 years after the deadly virus was discovered. So we can see quite obviously the impact that technologies can have on accelerating our ability to meet new needs. Secondly, a lot of what we see in the digital workplace is a need for connection and community. And while I absolutely don't dismiss that the uses of technology, too much screen time, the impacts of social media aren't always positive, technology is part of our communication fabric today. And hybrid cloud technologies have not only brought us the tools that allow us to collaborate and communicate virtually, but it allowed us the ability to gather so much data about our consumers and citizens that the experience they have feels very personal and visceral. And the possibility of that is endless. We're seeing technology used to tackle incredibly challenging societal issues, things that have deep complex, multifactored root causes. And while, okay, we may feel a little uncomfortable about things like robots, the idea that we can seek to tackle deeply personal issues such as loneliness with technology is kind of amazing. Thirdly, I think digital thrift is a real feature of the digital workplace. And I use the word thrift because I really like the fact that the word conveys a continuous, active concentration on ensuring we use our technology and associated resources carefully, not wastefully. It's a focus on spending money on the right things rather than just a general cost-cutting approach. I don't need to tell anyone on this call that there are 1,000 factors that contribute to any successful IT or technology decision or project, especially when we consider those things over time. And hybrid cloud solutions have undoubtedly given us more options that we can use to influence the success of such activities. To describe one option hybrid cloud gives you, I wanted to talk a little bit about an article I read recently that talked about how we depict people who are poor in TV and films. And it talks about that scene in a movie where, you know, your cash-strapped protagonist card gets declined in a restaurant or a shop, and that represents that they're cash-strapped. And how bad the article was talking about how bad this was as a way to depict financial challenges. Because if you're truly cash-strapped, you're much more likely to know exactly what you can afford and exactly what you can't. There isn't scope for the "this might go through" idea. And in our organizations, a lot of us are cash-strapped. So hybrid cloud solutions allow us a myriad of options to identify, meter, and manage costs in a very granular way, just like we would if we were cash-strapped ourselves. The second thriftiness option hybrid cloud technologies allows us is the ability to focus on the simple end result, the privilege to do that. And I'd liken this to discussions and thriftiness where, you know, you have those people who go, oh, it's really simple to eat healthily and cheaply because raw healthy ingredients like broccoli are relatively cheap. And they don't think about the huge ecosystem that goes behind being able to really cook well. That includes everything from available heating to the education to know how to do that, to pots and pans and condiments and a whole host of other things to consider. Our IT can be a bit like that. It often takes a huge ecosystem to get the ability to make things simple and to cost save. But hybrid cloud solutions, particularly when they're delivered as a service option or a managed service option, give us that privilege to choose when we can just think about the broccoli or when we want the option to dive into that ecosystem of shared knowledge, services, and information when we want that deeper understanding. And I think finally that cloud technology allows us to work in really different ways that are thrifty. And for me, that really boils down to automation. There's no artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, robotics without automation. And the cloud opens up a plethora of automation tools to the average organization. It's a fundamental shift when a line of code can do analysis that would take a human hours. So thrift in our digital workplaces is not just about cost saving, but fundamentally using your resources in a different way. And this idea of digital thrift is really important to the future workplace. While the possibilities of what you can do in the digital workplace and the tools available to us are pretty endless, we're only truly successful if we're digitally thrifty and use those tools carefully and not wastefully. Finally, security built in at every level of our solutions will be a feature of the digital workplace. And that means fundamental shifts to transparency, traceability, and tracking of data through our organizations, our services, and solutions. And hybrid cloud will power a transformation in this as we automate and connect different solutions into a single environment. We'll see less focus on the end destinations, like the equipment in our public, private, or on-premises clouds. And we'll think about how we actually track data openly throughout our organizations, in and out of our services, our platforms, our solutions. And once you can show the transparency of how data is taken in, processed, and outputted, you can establish some deep trust with those who provide that data to you, such as your citizens and consumers. And once trust is established, the possibilities are endless, whether that's trusting online voting, online medical information. We're already seeing some of the benefits of this type of transparency. So for anyone like me who was glued to CNN during the US election, you can see how the transparency of data and access to the information helped gain trust in the system, even when there were strong differences of opinion and doubts about individual motivations. So let's look at each of these trends in details and talk about where you might start today, down that path that may lead you to some of the possibilities. We talked about digital consumption and how much increase there has been in how our employees, customers, and citizens are consuming data. We know that our organizations struggle to meet constant and ever increasing demand for new information, services, or products. So where can we start? Well, your website is a really practical area to consider. We've been working with Aceville, who's one of the UK's largest, leading and fastest growing independent magazine publishers. They produce at least 36 different websites, all requiring content updating constantly and new information fed into them and new deployment. And we've been working with them to deliver their websites using AWS's public cloud. And what we've really concentrated on with them is to help ensure their websites are able to be updated automatically end to end. They'd already moved towards automating lots of their work. But as we went through this process, what we found is often that they were adding elements of configuration, which meant that they were doing a lot manually and weren't really getting the true benefits of being able to adapt as quickly as possible. By automating their services end to end, we've been able to help them increase their speed of change, increase their deployment speed, and being able to ensure that there's limited downtime on their sites. They're now able to deploy more and more websites by the day, accelerating their ability to grow. We talked about digital connection, and for me, there's two key ways that you might start thinking about digital connection. Many of you will already have adopted tools such as Teams that we're using today to conference and share documents and collaborate. And these software as a service tools have proven themselves during the pandemic. And as we continue, we're going to see more examples of those off-the-shelf tools being used where they can be, giving us the privilege of not having to sweat the detail that sits behind them. We're talking to customers today about other off-the-shelf type solutions that can help them, particularly voice-related technology, call center tools, but also tools to help manage desktops and make that much more simpler. Both are great ways to power your future workplace. That being said, though, I think that the heart of real digital connection is understanding and knowing your customer. And true knowledge is only really going to come from being able to get true insight from your information and data. So how you manage your data is really key to the digital workplace. And storage is a great place to start. Many of our customers today are tackling some of that data noise as a priority. Noise being that data that needs to be kept, but is the equivalent of the box in the garage You want to keep it, but you don't need to look at it often. We've been helping our customers segregate this data into really cost-effective cloud data solutions such as AWS Glacier. By clearing that noise away, customers are able to save money and focus on the truly important data. So that's another great, simple way to power your digital workplace. And as I mentioned, I'm really fond of the idea that digital thrift is something that will power the hybrid workplace of the future. I've been working in technology for over 20 years, and the most successful projects are those that really have clear, obvious values. And what we see in working with our customers is that co-location can often be the largest, most impactful step that organizations take in a cloud journey, both from a cost saving and cultural perspective. We've seen £1 million savings being achieved by our customers by moving to co-location. Most recently, Dundee City Council offset over £1 million of costs by moving into our data centre. And cost savings in co-location makes sense. It makes sense to your whole organisation that by aggregating services, data centres can achieve economy of scales that the average organisation can't. It makes sense to only pay for the power or the space that you use rather than over provisioning, and how that will save you money. It makes sense to have resources who are skilled at managing data centers rather than using your own resources to do that. They're easy concepts for your organization to understand. But co-location actually has a much more cultural impact within the organization. Co-location starts you down the discipline of segregating and simplifying your workloads. And by doing so, you can start to increase those levers you have available to you to adjust pricing for the whole future. And that type of thrifty thinking where you can adjust every piece of cost over time leads to those activities you have at the other end of the scale. So when we're working with customers to optimize their cloud environments and their cloud costs, we're able to help customers fine-tune all of the levers that they have to save costs. So one of the items we supported automating for Aceville, for example, is how they turned off some of their cloud resources automatically when they weren't using them to save cost. So while the technology may be different, there's a real clear path between the thrifty thinking of only paying for the physical capacity I need in a data center and only paying for cloud resources when they're on. So co-location might be the simple way to start powering your workplace that ends up in really complex cost optimization in the cloud. Finally, digital security. To be honest, security is a topic that can fill months of webinars. But when what we see again and again is getting the fundamentals right in security is the most likely route to success. We all hear the horror stories about the continual rise in security threats. But one stat that I think is incredibly interesting is that zero-day threats remain low. The threats we face are threats that are collectively known about, and there's a plethora of understanding about. That doesn't mean it's not challenging, of course. Identifying the issues and knowing how to deal with them is incredibly difficult for individual organizations. This is an area that we recommend partnering with experts in. We do that ourselves. We partner with Quorum Cyber for our own Security Operations Center. And as a partner, Bright Solid has a huge amount of experience and knowledge about cloud security and how to practically connect security controls to meet those key industry standards and protect your organizations. And we've worked with many organizations to identify and improve their cloud security posture and align that to best practice so they can demonstrate these benefits right across their organizations. We're developing products that embed security foundations right in at the core, such as our Cloud Foundation solution, which allows customers to consume native public cloud services, but with that bedrock of the right security foundations. So for me, while the digital workplace will be a constant place of change as we come out of this year and into whatever's next, but aligning your strategy to these 4 key pillars of consumption, connection, thrift, and security will help navigate your organization successfully through any challenges. And there's lots of practical steps that you can take today that will help you to do so. And if you need help, that's one of the benefits of the huge ecosystem that cloud has. Bright Solid works with customers at all stages of their cloud journey. Whether you need advice on where next, help in designing and building cloud solutions, or managing cloud solutions for the long term. We also appreciate that sometimes figuring out what is the best thing to do is tricky, or the next thing to do is tricky. So we offer tasters of many of our solutions free of charge, so we can help you to figure out those best next steps to accelerating and powering your hybrid workplace. So I'd like to invite you to come talk to us about your solutions and about what can happen next. I'm going to stay on the call, so if anyone has any questions today, let me answer it. But if you want just a one-to-one conversation, don't hesitate to get in contact with me directly or through our website, and we'll make sure you get that support that you need. Thanks for listening. I appreciate listening to webinars digitally is challenging. So I really thank you all for your attention, and I'll open it for questions.